want to get back to really one of our big stories, if not the big story of the day, the sentencing of Bernard Madoff. We're back with David Pitofsky, a partner at the law firm of Goodwin, Procter, and also Bloomberg News managing editor Pat Oster. So, Pat, you know what? I want to bring you back because Ruth Madoff's statement, we got it. What did we hear?
Well, she said she was devastated by the scheme, not devastated by the sentence, by the scheme. And I would suspect she's probably not going to be saying a whole lot because, I mean, one of the things that we have looking forward is, will Ruth be implicated in the crime? Will the sons? Will some of the people who worked for Madoff, like his CFO and his private secretary and so on? And in that respect, it's kind of a weird case because usually what happens is when you get to the top guy, that's the end of the story. But he was the beginning of the story. He walked in and said, I did it, and then I'm not saying anything more.
Right.
So the prosecutors are now kind of struggling without the cooperation of the mastermind to make the other cases.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, David, how do you make the other cases? If you were handling this, what would you be looking for at this point?
Well, the first thing you'd usually look for is cooperation from Madoff, and he would be able to explain to you how it worked. If you don't have that, then you have to start going through the documents, going through the emails, going through any recorded telephone calls. My suspicion is, though, these things are deeply hidden, and it would be very difficult to understand the full nature of it without someone on the inside cooperating. The truth is, in a fraud of this size, it cannot be handled by one person. My guess is it can't be handled by 5 people. So they may be going back to the lower-level people to start to work up to some of the middle-level people. Because it does seem that there were people that were most close to Madoff that seemed like the prime targets.
That one should assume that at some point there's going to be something that kind of tripped up in the documents that says, aha, you know, there was...
Well, the fact that no money was ever invested anywhere, and there certainly were people that were responsible for that part of the job, there's obviously going to be a huge gaping hole in people's work. There must have been people who were supposed to be playing the role of investors, putting the money into investments. They obviously couldn't. They obviously knew that there were no such investments, and so I would think the case against those people would be fairly easy to make.
Pat, you agree?
Yeah, I think there's an easy circumstantial case to make. But if you're a prosecutor, you don't want to be going in with that,
right?
Because you've got an intent problem. That's a difficult thing to do. They need to get somebody who says, look, here's how it worked. We're on the 17th floor, and this is the way Bernie had us run it. And they don't have that yet, or if they do have it, we don't know yet.
You know, it's interesting you said they've got the big guy, and that's usually ultimately what they're hoping to get. They started with that. Is it so important that they figure out kind of the underpinnings and figure out how this happened?
Oh, sure. I mean, you have to, I mean, aside from figuring out where the money is, you couldn't just walk away from it at this point saying, well, it's kind of a tough case to make.
Right.
I mean, you're going to have to, there were people who were involved on a daily basis putting things into a computer. He had this old IBM computer system that he used to send out, you know, all the accounts. You want to find out how that fraud worked so that you can make sure that everybody who was responsible gets whacked.
David, is it surprising that they haven't been able to figure out how it works up to this point?
No, these cases take a long time. They have resources they've had to put to the Madoff part of the case. They've had resources they have put to the assets, finding all the assets, getting the asset forfeiture.
It's not just
That's international. And, you know, time is on their side. The statute of limitations for these cases is very long. They want to make sure that when they bring a case, it's an ironclad case. There may be a push to go quickly in the early days, but that office is very careful, and I'm sure they're going to take time to make the best case they can.
Who would be your chief target at this point? Of course, you know, everybody talks about the wife, they talk about the sons, they talk about employees. Who would be your first person that you would be really kind of zeroing in on?
Well, my understanding is that the sons were on a different floor. It would be sort of the top lieutenants on the floor where the fraud was being committed. Those had to be the people who were in the know. Victims will say that these were the kinds of individuals that they were speaking to on a day-to-day basis, the people who were really doing the lying to some of the victims. I'm sure those people have been identified. I know lots of them have lawyers. I think that's the way the case is going to go in the near term.
Pat, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think you'll want the people who were closest to him, the people who had the most responsibility. So you want to take a look at his CFO. He also had a longtime private secretary who handled a lot of the most sensitive communication. So, you know, what do these people know? Are there emails in there? And these were people who gave orders to other people. So it's a likely place to start. But at this point, you know, that's just a guess and an allegation.
Is it safe to say, like you said, the time is on their side in terms of kind of uncovering information? Might it be 3 years, 5 years before we hear anything? Or do you think it'll be much quicker, Pat?
I don't think it'll be 3 to 5 years, but I agree that it'll be months. before we get the whole picture. But once you get somebody to say, particularly if it's somebody toward the top, to say, look, here's how the deal went down, then everybody's just going to tumble.
What about pressure on Madoff? 150 years, so we got the maximum sentence here. I mean, do you feel like at this point that he might start talking, or no?
No. It seems fairly clear to me that Madoff decided that the last honorable thing he could do was to take the weight himself and not push any responsibility on his family or people that he worked with. I think he's made that decision. I think he must have known that he was going to be in prison for the rest of his life. I don't know what benefit he could even get. Bringing his sentence down from 150 years to 100 years is not going to do anything for him.
Right.
I think that ship sailed. I think that they need to make this case without his cooperation whatsoever.
All right. So what about all of those investors, former investors for Madoff? I mean, what's left for them, Pat, at this point legally?
Well, they have a couple of things. One, if you had an account with Madoff, you're a direct customer, as opposed to a customer of some other company that put the feeder funds that put the money in, then you have insurance up to $500,000 on your account. And those victims are having a debate now with the receiver about what formula should be used. He basically says it's what you put in minus what you took out. So your original principal, and if you took out 10% of that, then you're going to get 90% back under the insurance. And if your amount was over $500,000, that's the limit. And then beyond that, the SEC and the prosecutors will get some money from the sale of his various property. They may have some money left over that they can give to victims beyond the insurance.
And my understanding, David, is you're one of the lawyers who's trying to get as much money back for the Merck and feeder funds. Is that right?
I have been recommended by the New York State Attorney General, but not formally appointed, as the receiver for the Ascot Fund, which was one of the Merck funds. And if I receive that appointment, my job is going to be to pull as much in for that small group of indirect investors who are allegedly the subject of a totally different fraud by Mr. Merkin.
Oh, okay. Okay, right. 20 seconds left here. In terms of, what's your take in terms of the Madoff investors, what they might see back?
Well, the money's huge chunks of the money is just gone. That's the nature of a Ponzi scheme. It's gone to Madoff. It's gone to extravagances. It's gone to investors that went in early on. The question is, are they going to get 5 cents on the dollar? Are they going to get 15 cents on the dollar? Are they going to get 25 cents on the dollar? It's not going to be 70 cents on the dollar.
Right.
They're going to be destroyed. Their life's work is going to be destroyed.
Okay.
The sentencing maybe helps them feel that justice was served, but it doesn't do anything to give them back what they lost.
All right. I'm going to leave it on that note. Pat, thank you so much. We appreciate our own Pat Oster and David Pitofsky. Thank you so much for walking us through that.